Cessnock Corrective Centre is a high-security prison, and warders here say they are at risk from prisoners because of inadequate staffing. They want one additional warder in each of 4 wings, and more staff for a proposed special area to be set aside for young offenders. Last Wednesday afternoon, the warders went on what the Department of Corrective Services describes as a wildcat strike. The 24-hour stoppage angered the department because it did not follow the usual dispute settling procedures. The two sides met behind closed doors today, and the department eventually agreed to negotiate the demands.
The department has conceded that there is a problem, and that they are making every effort to meet with us and work out the manning levels within the institution.
The department and the warders will meet again next Wednesday in an attempt to resolve the dispute.
Under the present legislation, farmers will have to pay a tax on the accommodation they provide for their employees, including shearers' huts, and also on the meals and other services supplied during the course of work. They say they can't afford the extra burden, and if they're forced to pay, it will mean men will have to be put off.
If you don't have somebody in the cottage, then you don't pay the tax. But as soon as you give someone a job, you pay the tax. And it becomes a tax on jobs.
Scone District grazier Peter Bishop is a director and employee of a private farm company, and hence he and his family, like others in the same situation, will be included in the tax. His company will have to pay a tax on the house he lives in and the meals provided under its roof for he and his family, as company employees will also be taxed. Even the small farmer will be caught by the government's latest revenue-raising net.
If the farmer owns his own house, if he's a sole trader, he doesn't pay a fringe benefits tax until his son turns up. If he pays his son to work for him, then he has to pay a fringe benefits tax on the rent that he doesn't charge his son and the food that he supplies his son.
There's no denying the farm sector is struggling at the moment due to global oversupply problems, but it's feared this latest impost may be the one to finally sink many farmers who for so long have been such hardy and resilient contributors to our economy. Had the season been kinder, this should have been a paddock of knee-high oats and lucerne, but it's been very dry. In fact, here in the Upper Hunter, 6 of the last 7 seasons have been drought declared. The insidious thing about the fringe benefits tax is that it doesn't take into account this. Regardless of whether a farmer has an income or has no income, the fringe benefits tax will have to be paid.
It's supposed to apply to people who are well-to-do. It's supposed to get the fringe benefits from the fat cats, but on the land it's going to hit people that haven't got any money. If the law makes pretty criminals out of us, then it's a silly law. Older and wiser heads than mine have said that you can't enforce a bad law. I just hope that proves to be the case now.
From a conservation point of view, it certainly has depressing elements, aspects that concern all of us and are concerning the people that are behind industry. And that side of the landscape, I mean, when you think of most landscape subjects that are in painting, they tend to be bountiful agricultural subjects or something pretty. Well, the darker side of the coin is as much a part of life as the former.
So you were trying to make a conservation statement?
Not just an objective look at it, it's from a biased point of view where I see the industry should respect the environment. The memorial to coal is the one that is the most, gives me anyway, the sense of place that is of Newcastle or of industry, and particularly of the elements, the issues that are raised in conserving clean air and producing clean water. One on smoke, which again has a rather sombre aerial view of the city of the centre rather of Newcastle's smog. We have a helmet which has a threat moving around the city. Perhaps anyone that puts a helmet on, either in the pits or on the roads, is in danger of their life, and you might even see a skull emerging from it. The mundane and the obvious in the Newcastle environment, such as the rusty roofs and the older mining houses, these are prominent features of the Newcastle environment, and I've been looking at those with some interest. Notice the television aerial too. I suppose Channel 3 will be interested in that point.
More than 4 million Tranquilizer prescriptions for women are filled each year in Australia. The drugs most commonly prescribed are in the benzodiazepine group, recognised by such common names as Valium, Seropax, Mogadon and Diocesan. The drugs are prescribed as an answer to the problems women experience during traumatic situations, such as family bereavement, domestic violence, depression and other stressful situations. The Women in Tranquilizer campaign launched today under the Drug Offensive banner features actress Ruth Cracknell in television and radio commercials. The message is, give your feelings a chance.
Feelings are the signposts of our lives and we should never ignore them. It's good to feel. Tears and fears are just as important as laughter, so try not to sell your emotions short with tranquilizers.
Claudia McKinnon of the Hunter Drug Advisory Service says that older women and unemployed women at home with children are most susceptible to becoming dependent on tranquilising drugs. Once women begin taking the drugs, a vicious cycle begins as the symptoms of withdrawal, when she decides to stop taking the drug, often mimic the original problems the woman was experiencing.
The problem again with tranquilisers is that they become a problem in their own right.
The theme of the campaign is Give Your Feelings a Chance. This implies that it's not just a drug problem, but a problem of re-education. What alternatives are there for women in trauma?
We're saying for women to try and make use of other services, such as counselling services, the community health centre, or, for instance, the Working Women's Centre, and trying to see whether there are other ways of coping with stresses other than resorting to tranquilisers.
It is in many ways a typical story of the Australian economy in the 1980s, a small factory forced out of business by cheap imports. The factory has been making fire extinguishers since the late 1950s and was a furniture factory before that. Today the Hanbury Street premises were all but deserted, with only a handful of office staff remaining to tie up loose ends. Last Wednesday, all 88 workers were retrenched, including a few who have been at the factory for more than 40 years. Trades Hall President Dennis Nichols promised to try and save their jobs, but all the employees eventually took their redundancy money and left. Wormald offered 20 of the workers employment in other sections of the company, but at this stage only 3 have accepted the new jobs. Wormald's is keen to point out that it tried very hard to avoid the closure. The Chief Executive of the Fire Control Division, Bob Burns, said in Sydney today that he closed the factory with regret. He said, however, that Australia still has a major problem remaining competitive with overseas manufacturers. Merriweather High School has been ambitious in its treatment of the boyfriend. Set in a French finishing school, the students designed and built the sets themselves, and the music is provided by the school's own 13-piece orchestra. 30 students from years 8 to 12 make up the cast, including both a Japanese and American exchange student. The cast is led by Lyndall Dick, who plays Polly, a young heiress. She falls in love with Tony, played by Andrew Jenkins. Polly believes Tony's a messenger boy, but there are plenty of complications until she finds out he is in fact the son of very rich parents himself. The boyfriend will run for only 3 performances starting at Merriweather High on the 10th of next month.
The 1985 Hunter Region Summit set the ball rolling for the development of the Social Services Council. There was concern that broad social issues in the Hunter were being overshadowed by industrial and economic issues. Today at Morpeth, the steering committee set up to establish that council met to discuss what had been achieved so far and what needed to be done. The proposed council will involve a variety of volunteer groups from throughout the valley, with the organisers concerned that the council comes from the community upwards rather than from pressure from above. Reverend George Mainprize is the chairman of the Hunter Summit and the convener of the steering committee for the Social Development Group.
The Social Development Council is aimed to bring together the welfare and community development and whole social development spectrum so we can speak with one voice and set some regional priorities which we can then translate to the people in Sydney and Canberra who make some of the decisions about how much to spend and where and on what.
Today's bidding marked the 3rd day in the auction of the Vintage Car Museum at Foster. Motoring enthusiasts from throughout Australia were tight on their purse strings, much to the disappointment of owner Chaz Haddon. The collection is valued at nearly $1 million, but with no set reserve, some vehicles were selling for well below their value. Chaz said he tried to keep together the collection which has taken him nearly 50 years to establish, but received no help from local or state authorities and was forced to auction.
I wrote to everybody in the district that should be interested in keeping this here as a tourist attraction, but I got no results whatsoever. And I think it's remiss of the area to allow it to be closed up, especially when I offered it to them at a price that wouldn't even put the floor down.
According to Chaz, this 1923 Alvis racing car is priceless. It holds the record at the Maroubra racetrack of 120 miles per hour, but it's part of an Australian heritage collection that will now be scattered throughout the country.
Well, I think this is Australia's heritage. Absolutely, Australia's heritage going out to every corner of the country.
The Department of Agriculture has declared a total of 36 whole and 10 part districts drought affected throughout the state for the month of June. This is an increase in the number of pasture protection districts affected during May, despite useful rains over much of the state. Because of the rain, many winter crops could be sown, and provided sufficient follow-up rain falls, the Department of Agriculture says overall crop yield could increase. The department also says hand feeding of stock is continuing and the use of travelling stock routes is increasing. Worst hit by the latest drought declarations is the central west of the state, which has had little rainfall and limited the amount of winter crops sown. Minister for Agriculture and Fisheries Jack Hallam says farmers in drought-declared areas are eligible for a range of financial assistance packages under the Rural Assistance Scheme.
More than 400 Anglican women attended the annual conference of the Newcastle Diocesan. It began with a mass celebrated by the Right Reverend Richard Appleby in Christchurch Cathedral. The conference gives the women from throughout the Hunter the opportunity to come together and celebrate Mass and to take account of the activities of the various women's church committees over the preceding year. After the Mass, the business session of the conference began, followed by an address by Father Gore in the Cathedral Hall on his experiences in the Philippines. He said he was labelled an activist priest because he challenged the prevailing Christian opinion that the cruelty and desperation he saw in a country of obvious wealth was the will of God. He applauded the courage of Mrs. Aquino and said that if she fails, it will be the fault of Western Christian democracies, not hers. It is they, he said, who bankrolled the Marcos regime, and they must now be patient in waiting for the repayment of the Philippines' massive debt.
So it was this kind of an involvement.
The small business revolt seems to be gaining momentum quickly. A week ago, 16 businessmen held a meeting in Maitland and decided to form a lobby group called the Hunter Small Business Proprietors. Last night's first official meeting of the group at the Hexham Bowling Club attracted more than 200. The general feeling amongst small businessmen is that their survival is threatened by the planned fringe benefits tax, superannuation and capital gains tax. The group, which is affiliated with the Small Business Association formed in Sydney, is sending a petition to Federal Parliament protesting the government's plans. While the Small Business Association is calling for a strike on July the 1st, the Hunter Group decided its members will work an extra day to make its point. John Farraher, who owns a furniture removals company, was last night elected president of the group. He says small business dissatisfaction is growing.
Committees have been organised all over New South Wales. There's, as you heard tonight, there's 8 or 9 groups in Sydney. There's a group in Coffs Harbour, in Wollongong. The group was only, committee was formed last Wednesday night at Maitland, which 16 people attended, and that was to formulate the direction of the group. A bigger meeting has been called to see what support or groundswell support has been forthcoming, and you can see the support that's here tonight. Everyone's very concerned, and that's why the apathy has been turned around to very concerned business people.
Under its new official logo, the Wetlands egret, final preparations for the 4-day symposium were being carried out today at the Shortland Centre. Only 3 weeks ago, this theatre was a mudhole, but with a little help from the Westpac Bank, a new lecture and audio-visual room is now operating. The Australian theme for World Environment Day is Wetlands is not just for the birds, and that's exactly what English environmental expert Joe Blossom will reveal in one of the 48 papers to be presented covering conservation, management and the ecology of the wetlands. The 4-day symposium will be a major step in establishing the Shortland Centre as a leading authority on wetlands. In fact, it's a world first and will put Newcastle on the map.
Well, we can say that there's nothing like this ever happened in Australia before. This is a major first, not only for Newcastle and New South Wales, but for Australia. Never before has anyone attempted to bring together all the experts on wetlands research, wetlands conservation, wetlands management, all together at the one time. And it's coincided beautifully with the establishment of our
convener of the symposium and believes it's just the beginning to making the area a focus of environmental distinction.
We hope that this becomes a centre for excellence into wetlands research that's not only Australia-wide in its influence, but attracts people from overseas, because we think we have a lot to offer here.
It was donated to the Belmont ambulance station by the local Lions Club, and to mark the handing over, a demonstration and a ceremony were held this afternoon. But just what is a mast suit? They came into use during the Vietnam War as military anti-shock trousers. Today's civilian interpretation is medical anti-shock treatment, but the job done is the same. By enclosing the lower half of the patient's body in the suit and inflating the air cavities, blood flow to the legs is substantially reduced. This ensures maximum blood to the vital organs like brain, liver, kidneys and heart. The legs pull a lot of blood and don't really need it in a stressful situation, and it takes a trained ambulanceman only a minute to apply the trousers and inflate them. Today's demonstration was performed by the station officer at Belmont, Peter Murray, while Belmont Lions president Jack Felton presented a cheque for $1,020 covering the cost of one adult and one child suit to Superintendent John Rumble. Dr Raj Gupta, a local GP and Lions member who helped organise raffles to raise the money, looks on. Oh, and by the way, the youngster having an extended school lunch break and almost nodding off in the noonday sun is Marshall Conway, son of local ambulance officer Gary Conway. The union wants a surplus in the Industry Superannuation Fund to be paid out in improved benefits from July the 1st and a 3% productivity-based superannuation claim. This agreement also surrounds planned compulsory redundancy, and each branch is deciding its own response. The port was idle for several hours after the day shift went home at morning tea time. And it wasn't until 3 o'clock when the afternoon shift came on that a cargo of aluminium began to be loaded aboard the Pacific Grace. The Waterside Workers Federation indicated quite strongly that further industrial action could be taken in the port tonight. However, a spokesman said it's expected there'll be a complete resumption of work tomorrow. The overall union policy is one of total non-cooperation with employers in an effort to force them back to the negotiating table.
The announcement of the grants was made in a press conference today at the Newcastle City Hall. The member for Newcastle, Alan Morris, and member for Charlton, Bob Brown, outlined the breakdown of grants within the $1.2 million total. The bulk of the grants, nearly $700,000, was allocated to general promotion, marketing and development of the Hunter as an attractive tourist location. Of that amount, $400,000 was earmarked for a Hunter marketing and promotions plan. That will be an ongoing program of market research, regional advertising and promotion. A regional signposting program will get $200,000 and will cover the entire Hunter region. The remainder of the money will go to establishing tourist information centres at Cessnock, Merriweather and Strait. As well as these, 2 specific projects have received sizable allocations. The William IV Replica project has received $250,000 towards its total cost of over $1 million, while the Shortland Wetlands Centre has received a grant of nearly $170,000 for the purchase and development of additional land. Alan Morris says the grants are a sign of the government's continuing involvement in developing this region's tourist industry.
But it's very important that our community and our tourist industry respond. If it doesn't, that's not really important.
Take the break, get the brochure. It's all yours. It's all in the Hunter.
Place to come as a tourist.